They told you to be quiet. They told you to bow your head. They told you sometimes subtly, sometimes cruelly, that something about you was wrong, that you should feel embarrassed for standing where you stand, for saying what you said, for refusing to kneel when everyone else was kneeling. And maybe for a moment, it worked. Maybe you felt that tightening in your chest, that familiar heat of shame creeping up your spine, that voice whispering, "Who do you think you are?" Because shame is a powerful weapon. It doesn't need chains or walls. It lives inside you. It convinces you to shrink yourself without anyone having to push. But here's the part they didn't count on. You didn't disappear. You didn't break. And now the truth is standing in the open, exposed to the light, while the lies that tried to bury you are collapsing under their own weight. Let's talk about that. Because what happened to you is not rare, and it is not meaningless. It's almost archetypal. Throughout history, the easiest way to control a person who refuses to lie is not to argue with them, it's to shame them, to make them look small, to isolate them, to signal to the crowd, this one is dangerous, don't listen, don't associate, and the crowd, terrified of becoming the next target, often goes along with it. Shame works because human beings are social creatures. We are wired to belong. Being rejected by the group once meant death. That ancient fear still lives in your nervous system. So when they turned their backs on you, when they mocked you, when they tried to reduce you to a caricature, it hurt. Of course it did. If it didn't hurt, you wouldn't be human. But here's the crucial thing. Shame only works if the accusation is stronger than your character. And yours wasn't. You see, people who rely on shame are revealing something about themselves. They don't have truth on their side. If they did, they wouldn't need to humiliate you. They wouldn't need to distort your words, strip away context, or assign malicious intent where none existed. Truth can stand upright. Lies need a mob to hold them up. Think about what it actually takes to withstand shame. It takes a kind of internal structure, a spine, a commitment to something deeper than comfort. When you refuse to lie, even when it would be easier, when you refuse to say the fashionable thing just to be applauded, you step into dangerous territory, not because you are wrong, but because you are inconvenient. And inconvenient people are always attacked first. They tried to make you feel immoral without proving you were wrong. They tried to make you feel alone so you doubt yourself. They tried to convince you that silence was the same thing as virtue. But something else happened, didn't it? Time passed. And reality, slow, relentless, and merciless, began to reveal what was true. The narrative started to crack. The contradictions became impossible to ignore. The same people who were so certain, so loud, so morally righteous, began to stumble over their own words. Evidence emerged. Facts surfaced. Patterns repeated. And suddenly the room felt different. Because exposure doesn't usually arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly. One inconsistency at a time. One question that can't be answered. One moment where the emperor is clearly not wearing clothes. And when that happens, shame loses its power. Here's something important. When they tried to shame you, they were betting that you would sacrifice your integrity to relieve your pain, that you would apologize for things you didn't do, that you would rewrite your own memory just to be allowed back into the circle. You didn't, and that matters more than you realize. Because every time a person refuses to lie, the world becomes slightly more habitable for truth. Every time someone says, "No, that's not what I said, that's not what I meant, and I will not pretend otherwise," the darkness retreats a little. This is where people misunderstand strength. Strength is not dominance, it's not volume, it's not cruelty disguised as confidence. Strength is the capacity to bear the weight of reality without becoming bitter or corrupt. And you bore it. You bore the misunderstanding. You bore the loneliness. You bore the temptation to retaliate in kind. And now the irony is unavoidable. The very tactics they used against you are the ones exposing them. Because shame is a boomerang. It always comes back, especially when it's undeserved. When someone tries to destroy your reputation without regard for truth, they are gambling with their own. When someone weaponizes morality for power, they hollow it out. And eventually people notice. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. You don't need to gloat about that. In fact, you shouldn't. Gloating is just resentment wearing a smile. What you should do instead is something far more difficult and far more powerful. Stand upright. Not arrogantly, not vindictively, but honestly. Say, "I told the truth as best as I could." Say, "I made mistakes where I made mistakes and I corrected them." Say, "I refused to lie, even when it cost me." That posture does something remarkable. It reorganizes the chaos around you. It sends a signal not just to others, but to yourself, that you are someone who can be trusted. And self-trust is no small thing. Many people live their entire lives at war with their own conscience. They say things they don't believe. They pretend to see what they don't see. They numb themselves to the quiet voice inside that says, this isn't right. That kind of internal division slowly destroys a person. You avoided that fate. At a cost, yes, but at a cost worth paying. Now, let's be clear about something. Exposure doesn't mean instant justice. The world is not a fairy tale. Some people will never apologize. Some institutions will never admit wrongdoing. Some lies will linger far longer than they should. But that doesn't mean the truth failed. Truth operates on a longer timeline than outrage. It reshapes culture slowly through individuals who refuse to surrender their integrity. And you are now part of that lineage, whether you asked for it or not. So what do you do now? You don't retreat. You don't become cynical. And you certainly don't become what tried to destroy you. You refine yourself. You speak more clearly. You listen more carefully. You take responsibility where it is yours and nowhere else. You learn from the pain without letting it define you. Because here's the danger at this stage. Resentment. It whispers, you were right, they were wrong. Burn it all down. That path feels satisfying for about 5 minutes, and then it turns you into a mirror image of the very thing you despise. Don't do that. Instead, do something much harder and much rarer. Become formidable and benevolent at the same time. Be someone who can defend the truth without becoming cruel. Be someone who can disagree without dehumanizing. Be someone whose presence brings clarity instead of chaos. That's how you win in the deepest sense of the word. Remember this, the goal was never to be proven right. The goal was to live truthfully. Being proven right is just a byproduct, and a dangerous one if it inflates your ego. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation from the same crowd that tried to shame you. What you need is alignment between what you say, what you do, and what you believe. When that alignment exists, something extraordinary happens. You become difficult to manipulate. Shame slides off you because there's nothing hidden underneath it. No secret you're afraid will be exposed. No lie you're desperately protecting. And that is freedom. So let this experience harden you in the right way. Not by closing your heart, but by strengthening your character. Let it teach you discernment. Let it teach you courage. Let it remind you that being misunderstood is sometimes the price of saying something that actually matters. Because the world doesn't need more people who are afraid of being shamed. It needs people who are willing to tell the truth, carefully, compassionately, and firmly, even when it's costly, especially when it's costly. They tried to shame you. They tried to silence you. They tried to reduce you to a headline or a label. And in doing so, they revealed themselves. Now it's your turn not to dominate, not to retaliate, but to build. Build a life that is so grounded in truth that no accusation can easily shake it. Build relationships that are honest enough to survive disagreement. Build a voice that is calm enough to be heard when others are screaming. Stand up straight, not because you're flawless, but because you're willing to take responsibility for your flaws. And walk forward. Not in anger, not in fear, but in truth, because in the end, that's what exposes lies. Not outrage, not mobs, not shame, but a person who refuses to abandon reality, no matter the cost. And that person is you.